Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this very exciting session, Rescued from Outer Space, Spacetech Driving Green Change. Thank you for joining us. So I don't know how it is for many of you, but maybe at a first glance, space might seem distant, something abstract orbiting high above our everyday concerns. But in reality, space is already transforming how we understand and protect life on Earth. And it's not just about science fiction, it's about science for sustainability, and it's happening right now. From monitoring deforestation and detecting methane leaks, to forecasting extreme weather and tracking sea level rises, Earth observation satellites are at the heart of global climate action, as just one example. According to the European Space Agency, over 60% of essential climate variables identified by the UNFCCC can only be measured from space. And these data sets are indispensable for scientists, policymakers, and communities trying to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Now, space technology supports the three pillars of sustainability: environmental, economic, and social. Environmentally, for example, it enables real-time monitoring of ecosystems and emissions. Socially, it can help to map vulnerabilities and improve disaster relief. And economically, it can drive innovation in sectors like precision agriculture, energy, and logistics. Now, at the same time, we must also turn our attention to sustainability in space. As we increasingly rely on satellites and on launch capabilities, we must face growing challenges such as space debris, resource management, and social equity. A sustainable future on Earth must go hand in hand with responsible practices in orbit. Now, we also see increasingly that governments are becoming more aware of the importance of space. Seeing as we are in Berlin right now, we must mention that in Germany, the new federal coalition agreement explicitly frames space as a key and future technology, linking it directly to sustainability, research, and innovation. And this strategic prioritization reflects the broader realization that space is not just about exploration, it's about solutions. And even more notably, Germany has become one of the first countries in Europe to establish a federal ministry that explicitly includes space in its title. This marks a clear political signal. Space is no longer about niche concern, it's central to national strategy. As our planet is facing environmental and social challenges, space must not remain an isolated frontier. It must become an integral part of how we build a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable world. And that's what today's session is all about. We'll be hearing from pioneers who are turning space technologies into practical tools. So my name is Chiara Moenter. I will be the moderator today. I'm manager for space at the German Aerospace Industries Association, and together with my panel, we'll explore how space is not only helping us see the Earth more clearly, but also taking care of it more wisely. And without further ado, I would love to introduce my panel to you. So, right over here, we have Daniel Seidel. He's the CEO and co-founder of LiveEO, a startup that uses satellite technology to monitor deforestation and support supply chain compliance in consumer goods sector. Welcome, Daniel.
Happy to be here.
And right next to him, we have Apsara Mitra. She is here in her capacity as the Deputy Technical Director at the Re-Earth Initiative, advocating for the use of space-based technologies for environmental stewardship and sustainability. And she's also an environmental activist and aerospace engineer at NASA. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Next to her, we have Thomas Grübler. He is the CSO and the co-founder of OroraTech, a company pioneering satellite-based wildfire detection and monitoring services. And last, but certainly not least, we have Gregor Lange, the CEO and co-founder of Talos, a company focused on the Internet of Animals, collecting and analyzing animal movement data to understand environmental changes. I'm very happy to be joined here by all of you. And we can start off with a really easy question. So if we're honest, the climate crisis is accelerating faster than our systems can handle. So what can space tech do today that has an immediate, tangible impact on Earth? Daniel.
I mean, the first topic is, of course, with Earth observation, understanding the problems in a better way, right? What you can't measure, you can't actually solve. And there is no better technology than actually space technology, because just imagine to gather data points of this beautiful planet with even with drones or by human, it's basically impossible, right? And what impresses me the most is that we have so many different types of satellites in orbit these days, and can measure all kinds of effects with a high precision.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Apsara.
Yeah, I think Daniel touched on a lot of it, but I would kind of add two things to it. The first is, I think we have the opportunity in space to be able to model a different way of innovating that we haven't seen here on Earth. We have, sure, we've started kind of these space missions and operations and constellations already, but we can kind of innovate in a new developmental cycle, sustainable by design, enable a circular economy that we haven't seen on Earth, and we can do that from the very start because we're still at those very nascent stages. And then we can see what we learned there and apply it back here on Earth. Because on Earth, we're trying to retrofit a lot of linear systems into these circular systems. And the second is kind of in line what you touched on already, is investing in education and applicability and openness of a lot of the technology that's available, and then also making sure that we enable the kind of open access nature of space-based data and information, so the most marginalized people and communities can access this data and develop adaptation and mitigation strategies accordingly.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think we will touch on this open access part a bit later on during our discussion as well. I'd like to hand over the question to Thomas.
Happy to answer. We currently operate about 10 satellites in space dedicated for forest fire monitoring. We fuse the data to provide with other data from space. And very often I'm talking with someone, yes, the satellite above Germany or above USA. And I say, no, the satellite, and this is very important, it's flying around the Earth. It takes 90 minutes from North Pole to South Pole to North Pole, and it always flies in a circle. And the interesting part is, as climate change is a global thing, satellites provide a global perspective on what's happening because they always fly around the Earth and we get the data from everywhere. So we get one source of truth, one harmonized data set to understand what's going on.
Fantastic. I think also a very good point. It's a global issue, also requires global solutions.
Still, this is very often the problem is then a local thing, but we can use global data to solve the local issues.
Fantastic. Gregor.
Yes. So what we are doing, we want to complement everything you heard already from my people here on the stage. We want to build the Internet of the Animals. So in short, how do we want to do that? We developed a very small transmitter, which you can see here. It's attached to an animal, doesn't cause any burden. So it doesn't change any of the behavior. It goes to the satellite, to our own constellation. We gather the data there, then it goes to the ground station and in the cloud. But what we're getting is the live biosphere by tracking the animals all over the globe. And you can see it, I hope, in the animation behind me, which is data we gathered already from a POC on the International Space Station, which ran for a few years. And you can see all migratory birds attached with those devices traveling all over the globe. And from that, we can get real knowledge about what's the impact of climate change on the animal life, on the biosphere. What's the impact of industry projects? What's the impact of biodiversity loss? It's like true data we get directly from the animals, and that's something we want to use as an application. There's so many use cases around that. Animals have been on the planet for eons, for millennia. They are perfect Earth absorbers. And we just want to learn from their reactions, from how they're not running into a wildfire, how they're not running into or flying into a thunderstorm. And that's a unique, completely new data set our technology, our space technology will enable.
Thank you. I think maybe we can still touch on this a little bit more. Maybe you can elaborate. So I recently learned a new acronym, which is DAM, which stands for Disaster Alert Mediation Using Nature. And so we see that space-based data is often seen as a tool for really observing the Earth's surface. And you've kind of elaborated what that could mean by constructing your Internet of Animals. But what are the real potential use cases also for us when we talk about this technology?
Well, there's so many. I think what you're referring to is like disaster response. That's like one major and very interesting ones. Animals are reacting to any kind of disaster very early. It's very much known. When there's a volcanic eruption upcoming, man-made instruments, they don't sense it too early, but animals react already. There's been scientific experiments where they used our technology with goats in Italy, and they found out that the goats are not climbing onto certain elevations on the volcano. So it's a very good indicator that there's something upcoming, and it's something directly measurable. Tsunamis, the catastrophe in Southeast Asia, you all know about it, with a lot of losses, a lot of people lost. Not so many land-based animals. They sensed it and they flew or ran away, so they were not attacked or attached by this catastrophe. So we can learn from that really much, and that's the knowledge, what we call the intelligence of animals, and we really want to harvest and use.
Fantastic. I think it sounds so interesting and definitely has
It is.
so much potential. So fantastic. I would like to now jump from the animals back to a topic that we covered just during the beginning, which is deforestation. Now, Daniel, LiveEO uses satellite data to track deforestation, especially in supply chains like palm oil or coca. Can you talk a bit more about who is your client for this, and maybe also touch upon how this gets enforced? Is it really applicable, or is it more just checking boxes for sustainability practices?
I mean, it's causing 11% of the global CO2 emissions, right, deforestation, and it's a big problem. And in the first years, first years of the company, we never went into the field because it was mainly driven by NGOs. But who of you knows about the European Union's deforestation regulation? Hands up. Awesome, because last year, if I would have asked the question, no one raised their hand. And this regulation actually changes the equation, because it goes to the companies who import commodities into the European Union, and it goes to the really to the companies, right, not to the governments. And I think this is changing it a lot. And basically, for the ones who are not familiar with it, the regulation is actually affecting coffee, cocoa, palm oil, soy, timber, rubber, and cattle. So actually, you now have to prove you didn't cause deforestation in the land of origin, and you need to go down to the farm level. It's a very complex challenge, right? So you really need to first understand the supply chain. Who are your suppliers? Who are your tier 1 suppliers? Who are your tier 2 suppliers? And then they need to provide information of the real farm. And that's now the beautiful thing, because we have global supply chains, and then you actually need to prove you didn't cause deforestation. How do you do this? With satellite images, right? So you can go back 2020 till today and see that there was no deforestation. And for me, I always like to say this is the connection from SpaceX to the chocolate, which will be deforestation-free, which you eat. And most of the people don't see that connection when they see the rockets of SpaceX. So I think it will have a really big impact. And some of our customers, to wrap that up, Bauhaus, do-it-yourself store in Germany is one of our customers. So everything you will buy at Bauhaus in the future, which has one of these 7 commodities, we looked at the farm to prove there was no deforestation. And the other company which I want to mention, I've never thought we will tackle problems like this with space technology, is a dog food trader. We have a customer who signed up for 2 years, very small company, they are trading dog food called Dokas. And we will now look at the farms where some of the ingredients come from. Never have thought that. And no investor has these markets in their TAM estimation.
So it's great to see that the animal theme is also continuing throughout our answers. But no, indeed, a very, very valuable application that will also help a lot of companies to enhance their sustainability goals. I would like to move over to Thomas. You've already talked a little bit about what OroraTech does and how your satellites are operating globally to track wildfires. Could you explain a little bit more what that means, tracking a wildfire? Is it more of a proactive, active, or retrospective response or tracking to this natural disaster?
The thing is that forest fires are a very natural thing. And forest fires are here to somehow reharvest the forest, to get rid of trees which are not needed, and so on. So forest fires are natural, and we can't fight every forest fire. It's nearly impossible. Also, it's not good, because then there will be even stronger forest fires because too much bush or whatever is lying around in the forest. So our solution allows to track these fires while they're happening. All the big fires are often happening for weeks, like in LA. It took, I think, 4 weeks or so. And it caused damages of 250 billion combined. So we're able to track these fires. We know exactly where the fire front is. Space solutions work day and night, and even if there are high winds and airplanes can't fly, can't get the situation, you can track the fire from space, and you can assist evacuation routes. You can prioritize how you're fighting the fire. So fire agencies use our data plus our simulation to predict where the fire is going, where it will be in 12 hours. And think about, if you know that the fire in 12 hours is 10 kilometers north, you can start now to make a fire break in 10 kilometers north, and then it's over. So space data even allows you to react very predictive, and instead of reactive, instead of after, it allows you to work predictive.
Thank you for that explanation. So now we've seen the applications, the Internet of Animals, the forest fire tracking and mitigation, the deforestation aspects. Apsara, you advocate for building sustainable infrastructure about and around Earth observation systems. What steps are needed, in your opinion, to ensure that these technologies are scalable, affordable, and accessible to a wide range of users, especially also developing countries?
Yeah, I think the kind of nature of this space has to come from a place of collaboration and healthy competition, but not toxic competition. And I think in the projects that I participate in, we're mainly focused on creating kind of a new infrastructure for the cislunar space, and collaboration is the name of the game. So we are partnering with academia, private institutions, public institutions, other international institutions, and that's how you can really kind of widen the scope, and that's also how you maintain this open nature of the data that is being used, creating an infrastructure that is open, making sure any data that's collected, any data transfer mechanisms are also open and accessible. And then also in the development process of any technology, and this kind of comes back to my origins as a climate activist. I always say I've been a climate activist far longer than I've been an engineer. And we really need to make sure that the frontline communities are involved in the technology development process from the very beginning, instead of getting their input at the end once the product is developed. Because the frontline communities, the marginalized communities, will know best what they require, what kinds of data that would be helpful for them to create adaptation and mitigation techniques, as opposed to, okay, now we have this technology, we're taking it to frontline communities, and they have to figure out how to use it. So we need to be able to make sure that we involve these marginalized communities from the very beginning. In my capacity at Re-Earth Initiative, that's one of the things that we focus on, funding projects that are kind of at the front lines of climate catastrophe and natural disasters.
Perfect, thank you. I think it's a very important aspect that you touched on of space, really. It needs to be collaborative, it needs to include different people. Gentlemen, I would also love to get you to comment on this as well, because you're the ones also working on these technologies and developing them, and also reaching out to certain partners. How have you been feeling this collaborative approach? Is that a key part that you also put into the scalability of your technologies? Gregor?
Definitely. I mean, we work very close with the Max Planck Society in Germany as a research organization, one of the big two. They actually came up with a solution we are using now. They called it the Icarus Initiative. And Icarus stands for International Cooperation on Animal Research Using Space. So it was always designed to be an international endeavor of building up the Internet of Animals. And that's what we continue, kind of. We are open to build this system and to scale it internationally, so it can be internationally used for the application, to get the data for research, for livestock, for Earth observation, for whatever application we will come up with in the next years to come.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think collaboration for us, there is no alternative. We can't do everything on our own, right? We have, for example, a team of 5 people in our partnership team who work on partnership, and it's we have very complex value chains on the space hardware side. We have a very complex technology on the software and cloud side, right? So we partner with some satellite operators, we partner with AWS, but also the closer you come to the customers in the distribution, right? We also have global customer base. So in some geographies, going without a partner is nearly impossible, right? So for us, it's on all aspects. It's a core of our business. And I mean, a good example is here on stage, right, with OroraTech, right? They do different things than we do. And we also very often talk about partnerships, and it goes hand in hand, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is an absolutely necessary part that we all work together on this. Again, the collaboration aspect. Thomas, would you like to say something to this as well?
Just to add that the problem is much bigger as any one of the small solutions. So by working together is the only solution to solve something.
I would like to delve in a little bit more into this topic, and Apsara, you raised it before, and also during our previous discussions, this aspect of stewardship that is so vital. But Thomas, maybe you can comment a little bit more. Now, we've heard of these different collaborative approaches that are necessary and needed. What role do also policies and politics play in ensuring that space is used responsibly?
What role is the politics basically set the framework, how it's used, how you are able to launch satellites, for example, in which orbits they're allowed to go, how spectrum is used, etc. The space framework is set by NASA or by ESA, and everyone is following it, and that's the main approach. But still, to add, space is still some green field, and if you want to launch something to space, every one of you can basically do this, and it's not much more expensive than a very, very nice sports car.
It's a good comparison, but it's not that far away, huh?
Yeah.
I'd like to raise the next question to Apsara, but please feel free to jump in, because we've touched on this before. Given that space is so global and is such a shared resource, or even there are discussions of space being a global common, how can the space community balance technological advancement also with responsible stewardship of both space and Earth? Another very easy question on my part.
No, I think it's an important one, and we definitely need to avoid, the tragedy of the commons in this space kind of regime. And it really is, as you touched on, Thomas, the Wild West still, where you can pretty much do whatever you want. And I think the only way to kind of regulate that, avoid that, is through policy, is through making sure that we don't create the same issues we've created on Earth, making sure we have regulation on the end-of-life cycle processes. Right now, it's a lot of use and throw. It's what ends up in space kind of stays there after it's after it's kind of ended its lifetime, for the most part. So we need regulation. We need policy around regulation. We also need policy around coordination. I think one of the biggest applications of, even cleaning up space junk and that kind of thing is making sure it remains accessible to the masses, making sure that you can keep having space missions, making sure that you can keep collecting the data that you want to collect. There's a really great space environmentalist named Murray Bajaw, and what he refers to a lot of times is we haven't reached that point yet, but it would be a pity for there to be so much space junk up there that it damages a resource that we are really reliant on, and it reduces all of our devices depend on it. We each have something in our pockets that depend on it, and it would be a pity for there to be some kind of blackout because we used it as our Earth landfill. I really do think regulation and policy is the way to bring kind of that sense of stewardship.
Perfect.
I want to add something. It's very important to say that space is very big, and there's a lot of space in space. And there's this concept of orbits. So depending on what height you are, that also defines the speed, how fast you are circling the Earth. And if you're like at 400 kilometers, you're circling the Earth in 90 minutes. If you're at about, I think, 40,000 kilometers, 40,000, then you're basically circling the Earth at the speed as the Earth is turning. So at this 40,000 distance, and then there's the other misconception, there's vacuum in space. It's not fully true, because at 400 kilometers, there's still, from time to time, a small molecule of air passing by. And this time to time allows you to slow down or break the satellite over the years. So at 400 kilometers, you're basically deorbiting within 6 months. And then you're blowing up, and it's gone. And therefore, if you use space in the lower orbits, it's super sustainable because it clears up itself. Even if you send up a cheap, like the sports car satellite, and it breaks up because you made a mistake, it blows up after a few years, depending on the height. So at 600, it blows up after 5, 7, or 10 years, depending on the size, and it's cleared again. If you go on a higher distance, like 1,000 kilometers, it stays here for many hundred years. So you always need to decide how you tackle sustainability in space, and at what orbit you are and what distance. And then you can understand that it's very easy to build very cheap, unreliable satellites. I'm exaggerating now, but put them in a lower orbit, or to build high reliable things, we need to take care about space junk in a higher orbit.
I think it's very important. Thank you for clarifying this, because there is, as you say, so much space in space that it is important to keep all of these factors in mind. Now, I have a clock in front of me, and it is slowly running out, even though I think we could continue for a long time. But I have prepared one final question that I would like to do kind of a tour of the table with. I'd like to start with you, Daniel. And it's another really easy one. It's, what is your number one priority on what is needed to save our planet using the tools and the technologies you provide?
The number one priority is getting it into the technology and the solutions we have into the hands of the people who really can drive the change. Like we see in space and Earth observation, very often we have a lot of tools which show something, but we don't mitigate the risk, right? So my motivation for LiveEO is we always give it into the hands of the people who can mitigate it. It started with our first product where we monitor infrastructure grids. Our key users are the field crews outside who are maintaining and managing the vegetation, right? And now with the deforestation, it's the people who import, who need to make decisions. That's what we have to get to, and that's my number one priority.
Fantastic. Apsara.
Yeah, I'll kind of just add to what Daniel said, and that is investing in technology and architecture that will serve the most disenfranchised people on this planet, and involve them in the technology development process, developing space technology that will improve life on Earth, and not just for some other reason, and then also creating this circular development process.
Fantastic. Thomas?
As the end, I want to say, at these low orbits, satellites are super cheap, so basically you can suddenly deliver services cheaper than with airplanes or other ground-based infrastructure. And this is a new opportunity we really need to look at. Okay, we go in this low orbit and we get it better than if we do it on ground. And still, we should not forget, as Daniel said, who is the user? So make it accessible to the user, and the user has no idea about space. So if you're launching a startup, you need to understand what the user is doing and how you are selling it there, and the space is something in background, some infrastructure, like your internet connection or something else.
And Gregor, over to you for famous last words.
I mean, having the tools, using the tools, I think. I mean, we're bringing so much tools on the table, Earth observation through satellites, optical, wildfire detection. They have to be used too. We had in the beginning of this event, there was a good presentation of a climate researcher, Johan, about the tipping points. We have so much knowledge we can really use to avoid a catastrophe in climate, and I think that's what we have to do.
Fantastic. I think we've got a really good set of priorities, and now let's put them to action. So thank you very much, Daniel, Apsara, Thomas, and Gregor for joining me today on this panel, and thank you to all of you.